The Bermuda Triangle, submerged pyramids Conocimiento Pleiadiano September 23, 2020. What happens in the Bermuda Triangle? Why are ships and planes disappearing? Discover the secret of this mysterious place. Start of the video. The Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle, is an area located north of the Atlantic Ocean. This area defines an imaginary triangle between the Bermuda Islands, Puerto Rico and the Bahamas on the Florida Peninsula. The triangle is known for numerous cases of mysterious disappearances of ships and planes. Although Earth science has been careful to justify these disappearances and attribute them to natural causes such as hurricanes or gigantic methane gas eruptions, tropical storms, or even human errors such as ships with excess loads, inexperienced or disoriented pilots, and even piracy. The reality is that no evidence has been found for most of these disappearances, and they are currently on file as unknown causes or reasons. And it is that in this area that planes have disappeared in flight, many of them military, but also passenger planes. Some have disappeared even while receiving instructions to land. But also small boats and large ships, as if they and their crews had been dragged into another dimension. Some very large vessels like the 129 meters long Marine Sulphur Queen freighter or the 19,000-ton Cyclops, with 309 passengers on board, simply vanished. But there are ships that not only disappear, but are later found adrift without a crew with all their cargo intact. For example, the case of HMS Rosalie in 1840, ship that was heading to Havana, and that was later found mysteriously with no one on board. The list is long, very long. But perhaps one of the best known and probably the most famous incidents is that of Flight 19. On December 5, 1945, a squad of 5 bombers, TBM Avenger of the United States Navy with a crew of 14 people left Fort Lauderdale in Florida at 10 minutes past 2 on a training flight. Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor was leading the operation. The mission was relatively simple. They had to fly over the Atlantic to the east and carry out a low-altitude bombardment on some sandbanks, and then continue 140 kilometers, make a turn to the north and travel another 140 kilometers. Lastly, they had to carry out a maneuver to head southwest and after 220 kilometers return to base. It was a regular exercise and one that other squads had done earlier that day. The flight seemed to be proceeding normally since around 3 in the afternoon the base picked up the transmissions of one of the squadron members requesting permission to launch their projectiles. The problems began shortly after when, at around 3:40 a.m., Lieutenant Robert F. Cox, who at that time was flying with other groups of trainees to perform the same exercise, received one of the transmissions from Flight 19 where one of the pilots asked for the readings, the other compasses, and communicated to the rest of the squad that he didn't know where they were. Cox, not knowing if that transmission was from a ship or plane, quickly identified himself and offered his help, but received no response. On a second attempt, he received a response identifying himself as FT-28 Taylor, explaining that his compasses were broken, that he was sure he was over the Keys, but he did not know exactly where or how to return to base. Cox, realizing the seriousness of the situation, quickly notified the base of the incident and advised Taylor to head towards the sun to return to Fort Lauderdale, but he told him that he saw strange visual effects. Even the sun looked strange. Although the base managed to communicate with the squad and asked Taylor to activate his transmitter to locate his position, even though he said it was already activated, no signal was picked up. Taylor informed the base that they were unable to determine their position, and that the ocean did not appear as usual. And although several course changes were attempted, the squad's last transmissions were unreadable, until the connection was completely lost. If the planes did not find the base soon, they would have to land anywhere for lack of fuel. Seeing that the squadron was no longer located, 3 planes took off with the aim of finding the group. At 6 o'clock, a seaplane, the Consolidated PBY Catalina, also took off, with the aim of finding the 5 Avengers and guiding them back to base. Later 2 more seaplanes of the Martin PBM Mariner type also joined the search. One of them was PBM-5 Buno 59225, which had taken off at 7:25 in the afternoon from the Banana River base with a team of 13 people and never returned to base. After a routine call to base at 7:30, it was never heard from again. It disappeared completely without leaving any trace. But before the end of the day, one more transmission from Flight 19 was received where Taylor asked his apprentices to fly in close formation. As soon as one of the planes marked critical fuel, they would all land together. But it seems that this message arrived late since according to the calculations of the tanks at that time the transmission was received, the plane should have been without fuel for a long time. During the next 5 days an intense search was organized, carefully searching the entire area both by sea and by land, with the aim of finding any trace of the squadron and the seaplane that had come to their rescue. But the search ended without success. But if up to now everything is a mystery, the mystery increases when 21 days after the accident, the brother of George Ponessa, One of the crew of Flight 19 received a telegram that said, "You have been misinformed about me. I am very much alive." Signed, Georgie. Georgie was the nickname his mother had for him when he was a child. In the official reports of the Navy there is no record that the telegram was investigated, although it does appear. Even today no trace of the planes has been found. The case remains on file for unknown reasons and the 26 missing people are listed as dead. But to this day there are still mysterious disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle, although these are very sporadic. The last report was on May 15, 2017 when a MU-2B twin-engine aircraft was heading from Puerto Rico to Florida with 4 American passengers on board. Air traffic control in Miami reported the loss when MU-2B suddenly disappeared from radar about 37 kilometers east of Eleuthera. Coast Guard spokesman Lieutenant Ryan Kelly at the time reported that there were no signs of adverse weather conditions at the time the aircraft disappeared. This information is provided by extraterrestrial people, women and men from the star Taigeta and the Pleiades cluster, through a written contact with us. Conversation with Yajaswaru Tasheret Yajaswaru explained to us that there are pyramids underwater where the cities of Atlantis were. Some of them are in the Bermuda Triangle area. Those pyramids are still functioning and are partly the cause of the magnetic anomalies in that area. According to my data and Taigeta's, which are very reliable in this case, nobody uses them. Rather, they remained as operational reactors that are just there, operating despite being immersed in water and under meters of marine sediment. But those pyramids have been there since the flood, and no one is using them. But they still produce energy because no one has salvaged or attacked them, meaning that no one has taken their internal components and parts of their structure, as happens with the pyramids on the surface, such as those of Giza or those of Mesoamerica. So those pyramids are there, and there are at least 3 below the Bermuda, Puerto Rico and Florida area, without anyone to attend to them and constantly producing energy that is not turned into anything useful. Sometimes this energy is discharged into seawater and underground. This is how they work anyway, thus creating electromagnetic disturbances in the area. They create portals because it is part of their very function, not only as reactors. So when too much energy builds up, they release it. See it as a relief valve that activates. At that time they create a high energy point in the area that differs from the average of the planet. Anything that is, at that moment, in the area of influence of that high energy will change frequency vibration, the same principle as how a spacecraft changes frequency density, but in a controlled way. So this area is dangerous because it surrounds the entire area with other frequencies that are portals themselves, and as something of an equivalent frequency, it is only more than that it has the same frequency. That is, if we have a frequency represented numerically and that frequency is equivalent to Namibia and the desert, every object that is going through this electromagnetic disturbance, such as a ship, will stop having the frequency of the sea in that area, and suddenly have the frequency of a point in Namibia, in the desert. And suddenly they have a container ship stranded in the desert. The problem here is that nobody is looking after those pyramid zero-point reactors, so they do whatever the automated systems decide. Oftentimes it is not an electromagnetic flow or bubble strong enough to move an object to another location, such as a traditional portal, but only to slightly alter it in frequency. That alters the position in time of the object, although not of its place. So the ship remains in its logical position at sea, but in another year entirely, another position in time. Because in itself, everything is frequencies, there is no time as some objective external cause, nor are there distances. Everything is frequencies of oscillation, vibration. In a few words I describe vibration as the revolutions per minute given by the subatomic particles that make up the molecules of everything called material, with a time frame given by the observer. So far the Federation has done nothing to deactivate them, they don't even talk about it, just keep an eye on them. But they never consider deactivating them. I don't see a reliable reason why not. It wouldn't be complicated. But why specifically? I don't have the answer. But I have asked myself that question, and I have asked you that question in the past. Nobody answers it. And how can they continue to function even underwater? I don't think they are working at capacity, where the alterations on the surface would be very strong and obvious. A pyramid itself functions as a zero-point reactor just because of its shape. Internal systems make it more efficient. But the simple pyramid shape is enough to give it a lot of energy. In the case of these 3 submerged in that area, it is verified that they still have systems in operation. Those instruments may still be inside sealed chambers, dry chambers. And the fact that they don't really emit much energy and that those portals in the area are something very sporadic can answer why the Federation has never bothered to look at this problem more closely. Transcribed by Andrea Mdos, edited in this format by Tony Ruiz of Sociedad Taigeta. Translation by Space Monkey of Taigetian Disclosure, voiceover work by Robert Merland.